More news in Commander today after the hugely controversial bans that happened last week. There was a ton of completely inappropriate responses that led to credible threats of violence against the Rules Committee, harassment. It ultimately led to the Rules Committee surrendering the management of the format to Wizards of the Coast. Wizards announced the change in power yesterday and clarified a lot of the finer details this morning in a live stream. We don't know exactly how this will affect the format, but there's certainly a lot to talk about.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
It's been a long few weeks, folks.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Before we get into it, let's shout out our sponsors. CardKingdom.com/command is the place to go if you're picking up Magic product singles, anything at all. If you have to replace those Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypts, Docksides in your deck, well, CardKingdom.com/command is going to have all the inventory you need for the cards you're looking for, and the versions you're looking for, in the condition you're looking for. They also get you all your stuff in one convenient package all at once. You can't beat that convenience. This is where we get our own cards for things like Game Nights Live and decks we play on gameplay videos. So we can't give them a better endorsement than we actually use them. CardKingdom.com/command.
And when you get those cards, make sure you keep them protected. ULTRAPRO.com/command, because who knows what cards are going to need to have a sleeve around them in a couple of weeks. Just kidding. Every single one of them, because they're worth something. They're worth sentimental value. Who knows? ULTRAPRO.com/command has not only the sleeves, the deck boxes, the playmats, but all of the accessories that you need to customize your Magic experience to give them the bracketed protection that they are looking for. They also have the official Magic license for all of the art. So when it comes to the brand new art from either a secret lair or a new set, you're going to be able to find that on Ultra Pro product. Go to ultrapro.com/command to get all of the cool stuff that you need for your collection to make it look as awesome. We here at the Command Zone trust our own collections too. So why not you?
And you can support us directly by going to patreon.com/commandzone. All of our patrons get access to our Discord. You can come in and have the conversation that we're all having here in the Command Zone Discord. Plus, you get access to our gameplay shows, extra turns, game nights a day early without ads. There's lots of cool perks to being a patron, including we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to
Dennis Stork.
Dennis, you rock.
You rock.
You definitely rock, Dennis.
The news this Stork brought was quite immense.
That's how we're getting our mail from Wizards.
Yeah, from Wizards. It's through Dennis Stork. Yeah, thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Another huge announcement dropped on Monday this week. What happened?
Keys have been given.
Yeah, it was...
Commander is no longer a community, quote-unquote, run format.
Right.
Wizards of the Coast has stepped in. Some people say this is an inevitable thing to finally have happened, but specifically the wording is, in partnership with members of the existing Rules Committee, we are announcing that the Rules Committee is giving management of the Commander format to the game design team of Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, this is a direct result of the fallout of the bans that happened last week. There were actual threats of violence. There were actual repeated harassment against members of the Rules Committee. And I think it was just kind of a rude awakening that 5 volunteers who are not paid for this and are not protected by a larger body may not be well suited to run the Commander format anymore.
And everyone's given their statement on it at this point. I think rude awakening is a very good way of putting it. We all know that there's a lot of toxicity and vitriol within the Magic community. This is a collector's game. There's people that are financially invested in this game. There are people that are emotionally invested in this game. So as a result of what we have all, I think, deemed the most substantial banning ever in Commander, we saw a huge outpouring of passion and excitement and anger and every emotion you can list on the spectrum. A lot of it was directed directly towards the Rules Committee, members of this Commander Advisory Group who really didn't have much to do with it, as well as employees of Wizards of the Coast, as well as just random content creators. As a result of all of this, I think the inevitable outcome was that people decided, hey, maybe this isn't for me. I would like to have this be stewarded in a way, my job, my role here, in a way that doesn't put me just in open sort of like targeting zone for all of this stuff that has happened. And so this is what we would call the fallout. which is not a Universes Beyond product. This is what happens when a rules committee, which was volunteer run, is faced with an immense amount of pressure and also just direct threats of violence. No one likes that. Deciding, hey, there should be another way of doing this, and we are seeing that other way is management of the Commander format is now over to Wizards of the Coast. Specifically, they mentioned their game design team.
Yeah, I think they were really careful with their wording, and that's worth reiterating. Like, Wizards didn't take this from them. It was handed to them. They talked to the rules committee, and it wasn't like Wizards coming in and being like, okay, give us that.
Yeah.
It was a discussion, and the rules committee ultimately did make the decision to hand over the keys of the format to Wizards. And they were careful with their wording in a few places to make sure that was, that was clear. So I know there's always going to be conspiracy theories about everything else, but that's the messaging that we got, and I think is fair from the conversations that I've had on both sides. And just to underscore something Jimmy said there, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion in this episode about the rules committee and the decision and everything else. And I think we can all just make the blanket statement that, like, if you're making threats against people online, like, you're a jerk and you're a bad person. Like, don't do that stuff. And those people, they were a small percentage of it, but they have no place in this game and in this community, and you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. And let's just make the hard statement about everything we're going to say in this episode. The people making the threats, you suck.
Yeah. Would you do it in real life?
Get the hell out. We don't need you. And you should look in the mirror and, reevaluate your life and your decisions. I think it's just very clearly, if you're threatening people with violence, you're just a bad person.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about...
I want to do a metaphor because I think it's a helpful thing to just sort of get your head around what has happened here. And it's a way I've really been thinking about this situation is it feels like the rules committee adopted a kitten that they found on the side of the road and was like, oh, he's tired and he's wet and I'm going to take him in. I'm going to raise him as my own. And the kitten got bigger and stronger. And eventually they found out that the kitten's a tiger.
Right.
And it's too big for them to keep in their house. They don't have the resources to manage a tiger. They don't know necessarily what to feed a tiger, how to keep it alive and healthy. And they've done a really good job for a really long time. But this is the first time there's been fear or there's been real ramifications for like trying to keep this huge format under control when you don't have any financial resources, you don't have any data, really, you don't even have, you don't have the backing of any larger establishment. It's just, they'd been there the longest, and that's where the rules committee was kind of born of.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I do think the threats and everything kind of muddy the water a little bit here, and a lot of people are sort of glomming onto that as like, the end all be all of like the dominoes that fell to kind of get us where we are. Like, a lot of people are being like, everybody that didn't like the decision and lumping them in with the people that made the threats. And those people are a small percentage and they're over here. But the other people, they're just like, hey, I don't like this. And I'm expressing my displeasure at it in a reasonable fashion. I think it's okay to be like, this affected me. I don't like it. It sucks. It's okay to say things like that. It's not okay when you cross the line into like, spewing hateful rhetoric at people or threatening with violence. And those, like I said, are bad people. But it doesn't take away from the fact that like this is a very divisive decision, right? I think it's just clear at this point, you just don't want to see it and are lying to yourself if you don't sort of admit this is a very divisive decision, however you cut it. I don't know the percentages, 50-50, 60-40, whatever direction, it doesn't matter.
It's definitely not 90-10 in favor, right?
A lot of people were on either side. I don't know how to measure it. But you can't say that, for the most part, everybody was on board with this. That's just not true, clearly.
Yeah.
And I think in your analogy, the rules committee didn't call a zoologist and ask, like, hey, how can I care for this tiger? What should I do best? And that there is a failure of leadership. And I think it's fair to point out that, like, you found out it was a tiger, and then you kind of, or let's say a chimp, if anybody's watched that HBO documentary.
Yeah, I was thinking grizzly man.
And you kind of didn't take the responsible decision to like get the right experts to even try to help you to figure this out and what you should do.
You're like, I raised this kitten. He would never bite me.
And you kind of got into, if you watch the chimp show, the situation where like, by not sort of admitting to yourself what's going on, you put real people in danger, and it ended up with like bad things happening. And that's what this decision is, kind of a divisive fallout. And so we're both on the CAG. Listen, if you didn't talk to us, talk to other people. I've talked to people inside Wizards. I know for a fact they said, do not do this, you
do not do this specifically to
this ban.
Yeah.
Don't do these bans. Wizards' advice to the rules committee was like, don't do this. I don't know if they said, hey, just do Nado and Dockside or what, but they were like, this full decision, please don't do this.
We have had a lot of experience with bannings, right? We know what kind of fallout can happen. We are advising to not do this, is what Wizards will say.
Many of the Commander Advisory Group would have said, do not do this. I would have said, do not do this. Would you have said, don't do this?
Not all at once, certainly not after 3 years.
Yeah, don't do it like this.
Yeah, don't do it
Also,
like
like
this.
this.
Well,
certainly.
there's two things about the decision. One is the decision, and the other is the execution of the decision.
Right.
And I think that as an advisor, there were many points when I was on the CAG where, okay, fine, I don't agree with this decision, but fine, you're the leaders, you get to make the decision. Now, can we talk about the rollout of the decision, which is also another decision about how you do it.
Right.
And part of being a leader is the communication of what the things, and that was totally bungled. Like, so I think how we got here, a lot of it is fair to lay at the feet of the rules committee, because ultimately, as the dominoes fell, has led us to this point where, like you said, inevitable or not, they're handing the keys to Wizards. Like, this is a fulcrum point that we'll probably be pointing to, decades from now as like something that intrinsically changed the nature of Commander. Good or bad, I don't know. I don't think anybody can see the future.
Yeah.
And that's like a scary and dangerous thing. And so...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that handing the keys over to Wizards affects the format even more than the bans they made last week.
In a longer term, yeah.
In longer term, I mean, this is a fundamental change to how the format works. And banning fast mana is comparable, but I think in terms of long-term ramifications, this is a much bigger decision that they also made without the advice of the Commander Advisory Group.
I love that you brought that up. Bingo. This is something that I'm mad about it, to tell you the truth. They made another massive decision. There was no discussion that I'm aware of, and we're in the Discords and the CAGs, and I can't imagine who else you would reach out to, where they even considered keeping it community run. They I don't know, did you see a single thing where they reached out and said, hey, we're thinking about stepping down. We would like to try and keep this community run. Is there anybody that would be willing to step into that role to keep it community run? Listen, maybe nobody says yes. And by the way, if they asked me that, I'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But nobody asked. Nobody even, as far as I know, explored that option of like, should we keep it community run? They didn't ask anybody, hey, do you think it's a good idea if we give this over to Wizards? It was just another decision that they just made.
Would you assume that they would have asked you based on how they made the first decision?
Not the assumption, but I'm just saying they didn't learn anything.
Sure.
Yeah. But that's the way they operate. And clearly it is.
Yeah.
But I just think our next point on the sheet, which was probably a graphic as a lower third, but if you're listening to it, was how did we get here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I lay it squarely, mostly at the feet of the rules committee.
Yeah. I want to double down on what you're saying here, Josh, because I think the way that the storylines of this sort of thing works out is that right now the dominant storyline is threats of violence, unacceptable, now Wizards has control. And this is a very typical internet thing where we only look at the outcome of a situation as opposed to how the situation actually arose. And I'm someone that is all about accountability in every single form. If I make a mistake, I'm going to own up to it because that's how I grow and that's how it makes me uncomfortable and that's where I want to be if I want to grow. In this case, I think it is important to look at what you exactly said, which is the rules committee did something without much caution, it seems like, right? It felt like it was just after 3 years of nothing, a huge thing to enter us in. And I really want to make sure that when we're thinking about it online, one, this is not to just go after the rules committee more, right? We're not saying any of this to do it, but we're rather saying, look at the origin of what caused the tension that led to the threats, that led to all of the outbursts, that led to not just the tiny percentage of people that were given the threats, but almost, let's say about 50% of the community that vehemently disagreed on some amount with this ban. And it happened because of the way that it was handled and how it was executed. As a result, we also see that the way that this is being handled and executed with the format being given over is almost identical and could also still result in more threats. I could totally see someone saying like this, the bans I didn't care about, them giving it to Wizards, this is what I'm going to send a threat of violence about. There is a percentage of people that would do that out there as well, right?
Don't do that.
Don't do that, by the way, right? Obviously not. But you're allowed to disagree with it. But I'm just saying that if you're actually looking at the situation as a whole, it's very easy to just sit on the side of the story where it's like, well, here's who the victims are, the people that are getting the threats of violence, as opposed to how did this actually come about in the first place? You don't make a splash in the water without throwing a rock into it. And in this case, if you are forgetting that a rock was thrown, or a boulder in this case was dumped into a small pile of kiddie pool of water, then you're missing the point and only looking at the outcome as opposed to how we actually got here. So when it comes to anything in life, understanding the origins of it, and if it's in your own life, accountability, however that plays into your life, I think is a very important part to seeing the macro of what's actually happening here and not getting just lost in the very easy storyline of bad people are bad and innocent people are innocent and that's it. It's like, well, the truth is always way more muddy than that. One of my favorite stories is you have like 15 blind men in a room and there's an elephant in the middle. Yeah. All of them are touching the elephant, and at a different point, one person goes, oh, this is a piece of leather. And the person goes, this is a horse. And the other blind person goes, no, this is clearly...
This is ivory.
Ivory, yeah. All of them are right, but none of them are right?
No one can see the full
No one can see the full picture. And so I think in being sensible and actually understanding what's going on here, if you're not looking at the full picture, then just blasting your opinion onto the internet, which is something we all do, by the way. So accountability
We're doing it
there.
right now.
But doing it right now, this is going to help at least get some amount of, I think, comfort to a small degree so that you're not just lost in the sauce of what's happening here.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to say that I think the Rules Committee recognizes that what happened last week was not how it should have gone down. I've gotten multiple apologies from members of the Rules Committee about how, like, we understand that that was not how it should have been handled, and we are at a point now. And I think the decision to hand the keys over to Wizards was made by a group of people who are afraid and who were feeling beaten down by the internet and needed to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And it was a quick decision that was made, and they made it quickly to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. So I understand it's very difficult to have a level head when you are concerned about your physical safety. So I can forgive them for not being like, okay, we're going to hold a panel about what to do about your safety. But we have to look at it from the position of like, this could have been a lesson learned. We recognized last week was not how this should have gone down. And maybe we can improve a week later. So you have to see the humanity in the Rules Committee. That is, of course, where we're coming from.
And I'm talking about the institution of the Rules Committee and not the individual members, which
course.
I think you can separate, and you can say, like, the individual members are making decisions that make sense, I think, to everybody, right? Like, yeah, if you're getting threats that are, from people online, like, yeah, it's scary. And I can understand the decision of, like, let's give it to Wizards, who has the apparatus and everything more available to protect the people involved with the governance and things like that. Yeah, that decision makes sense. And I don't think that any of the people on the Rules Committee are like evil or bad. They have good intentions. These are people that we know. But I do think that, like, ultimately the decision of how this, A, the decision, and B, the decision of how to execute it did sort of lead us here. Again, the threats and everything should be put on the side. Everybody thinks those are bad. But the divisiveness was going to happen. Gavin said something interesting in the stream from Wizards, where he said that the response to the latest bans was beyond the scope of what anyone could have anticipated.
Yes.
And I disagree.
I disagree as well.
I would have anticipated it.
Big, for sure. Yeah.
When we heard about the bans, my first thought was, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And if you asked me, do you think there would be threats of violence against the people that made the decision? I would have said yes.
Yeah, I would have said yes, too.
Yeah.
Doxing, 100%.
I did think it was that big of enough of a deal that some idiots out there were going to react in that way. Doesn't make it okay, but the fact that it wasn't predicted to be as big as it was and they were blindsided by that shows a level of, I don't know, naivete, I would say.
Sure.
That is a little bit shocking as well. So, again, I don't want any of this stuff to happen. I didn't want any of this stuff to happen. We had a really good thing going.
Yeah.
The format's great. It's the most popular way to play Magic that's ever existed.
It's community driven. So
Community-driven, which is...
And WotC was happy about that too, by the way. Aaron Forsyth said as much, right?
Yeah, he did.
They were happy with how it was going.
They've had opportunities in the past. They could have swooped in and taken control if they wanted to. I don't think they've ever really wanted to. I think if you're a corporation, you're probably like, it'd be good if we had it. But they never really were like, we need to.
Yeah.
Let's ask this question then. Was this transition inevitable? Because I do think that is a sentiment that's online right now, is that eventually Wizards was going to run Commander. That was an eventuality.
Yeah.
Do we think that's true?
I think in a scientific way, it is. On a long enough timeline,
Yeah, totally.
it's true, right? At some point in 100 years or 1,000 years, somebody was going to make a decision, and there was always going to be a point where, the corporate overlords are going to come in and need to take over. But in reality, we'd lasted 13 years, and all we needed was steady leadership to probably last another 13 years, right? Because all you need is somebody who comes in, has the humility to understand the responsibility and the magnitude, and can just keep the ship going in the direction it's going.
Yeah, I mean, we know the Wizards, that the rules committee didn't want to hand it over, and we know that Wizards didn't want to take it. How long could we have gone?
Could we have gone
in
another
that
10?
situation?
Yeah. If you say it's inevitable, fine.
Yeah.
But it's not that hard to think of a scenario where we last another 10 years, right?
Sure.
Okay, well, if you can last another 10 years, then at that point, could you last 10 from there? So I don't believe it was inevitable in a practical sense, but mathematically.
Yeah, bound to happen.
And I think a lot of reasoning that people have put behind it is like, oh, Wizards could have just taken it. They could have just taken control, and it's in their best interest to take control.
This is
And it was
reactions to what has happened again, as opposed to what caused it.
Right.
It's
And the interesting thing about that is well, that would have gone badly. Look how badly it went when they were given it. If Wizards had just snatched control of the Commander format, I don't think they could have gotten away with that.
there would be threats of violence and doxing. The same outcomes from the worst of the worst, right?
It very likely wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Players can just be like, cool, I'm going to play Sheldon-era Commander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want, Wizards.
Yeah, we're not interested in you seizing power from the
You can
the
release
community.
whatever articles you want. We're going to play this. They could do it.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
effectively split the Commander format, I think.
3 new
which is
YouTube channels
not
would be
what
created
Wizards
overnight.
is interested in.
Which is why, I think they've never done it and never really had a desire to do it. But as a corporation, do they want direct control
Yeah,
of
of
their most
course.
popular format? I think, that's the best case scenario for them.
They've done everything they can in their power to have control over it by just creating Commander products, right? They are printing directly into the format. So that is the level of control that they have shown is what matters to them, which is selling cards and growing the player base, right? And as far as the handling of the rules and all that stuff, they reasonably were like, no, the reason that Commander is beautiful is because it has the community so involved in it. We want to keep that going. We're going to do what we can on our side as the game designers and the experts at this thing and marketing and all that stuff. But beyond that, it's like adding workloads to people's plates that only creates more danger and more risk as opposed, right? And so the other thing that corporations are always looking to do is stop how much risk they take on.
Well, the status quo was working. That was what I was saying, was we
Yeah.
had a good thing going here. The status quo was working. It grew from a little backwater. When we started this 10 years ago, it was a niche format. We started this podcast because there weren't podcasts about Commander. There wasn't really content about it. And we were playing it and we wish there was content. That's how different it is between 10 years now, where it's the most popular way to play cardboard Magic, probably that's ever existed. And it got there by following a pretty simple formula of just slow and steady. Don't make a lot of changes. Don't cause a bunch of waves. In the last 10 years, they haven't done anything like this as far as hey, let's make a statement. They even said in the FAQ, we wanted to make a statement. That's not something they did in the past. And so this, navigation change that they decided to do led us directly to where we are and led Wizards, who was like, we're fine with the status quo. Oh, crap. Now the ship is in danger of sinking here. Sorry, I also think the threats thing is real, right? It's not safe for the people that are running it, but part of it is because of the way they're running it, but also just they're not capable with resources and time and everything else to handle the storm that, has been created here. And so the status quo has already been broken. We're already not on that status quo we were happy with. Let's, from this point, step in. And again, I don't mean they grabbed it. It was clearly handed, and I like what you said, where I think most of us in the position the rules committee was, if we found ourselves there, it is logical and reasonable.
This potato is hotter than I thought,
Yeah.
and I would like someone else to hold it, please.
Yeah, you have mitts? Here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, here you go.
The way I see it is that the train for Commander, the conductor of the train has been replaced, but the tracks are already pretty much laid in terms of where the format was going and because Wizards works 2 years out in advance of products. So they already know 2 years from now what kind of cards they're generally looking to start making for Commander. So it's not like that much has drastically changed from at least a like where we are headed standpoint, from my opinion.
I mean, I think that remains to be seen. We've gotten some general statements about direction from Wizards, but they seem much more focused on this new bracket project than they do about
brackets.
Figuring out where the general direction of the format is going.
But I think that's the thing, right? Like Commander was headed in a general direction.
Yeah.
That I don't think is going to drastically change. It's not like Wizards, now that they have it, is going to go back to the design files. Let's completely redo Commander 2026 or whatever. Right?
I don't think they're interested in changing it. I don't think necessarily that means it won't change. I think there's certainly unintentional consequences that come with a completely new guiding body taking over, because they haven't made all the rules committee had made mistakes and had adjusted and had learned. And they've been, the rules committee for, 13 years. Mm-hmm. And Wizards has never had to do any of this before. They said in the stream that happened today, this is not like any other format they have ever managed. And now they have to figure out how to do it. And, they're starting with this sort of very big bracket project, but it feels like maybe that's a mistake. Maybe that isn't. We're going to find out how it all works from here on out. And I think nobody can really say what happens from here, right?
Yeah. But fortunately, it's not like the rules committee did that much in the past few years anyway.
Yeah,
right?
The format doesn't require a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
It
so
really
what
doesn't.
is Wizards actually inheriting here outside of title and a lot? We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good segue, Jimmy, into sort of the next part where we're saying okay, these are our thoughts on how we got to where we are.
Yeah.
And now it's like, we are here. Wizards is going to manage the format. And what do we think about Wizards managing the format? Do we think it's good or bad? And we've got some pros and cons listed down here.
Yeah.
The cons are definitely longer than the pros.
Yeah.
Well, they take up more space on the page, but
they do. I think there's a very few people online right now talking about the pros, and it's worth pointing them out, right?
Right.
There's definitely some pros.
I think there's some very concrete pros to Wizards running the format. But not to mention, I think the greatest of all is just financial resources, manpower, and their communication resources.
Yep.
Are a huge thing that Wizards offers is just money and time. And that's not something that the rules committee ever had access to.
Yeah, and I think it also manifests in ways of research and data.
That too.
Which is really important and something the rules committee didn't have, and I will say didn't go out of their way to actually ask for people that did have it to give it to them. Mm-hmm. But Wizards, and I like some of the stuff that was already being said. So Aaron Forsyth in this stream said that the format is so big and there's very little concrete information about it, basically. He said this is unlike any other format we have, because in other formats we have tournaments that give us results, that give us data. This one is very hard to know. I like Jimmy's elephant parable a lot. I have described this as a dark room that you're in. Commander is a dark room that you're in and you cannot see. Mm. And you don't know how many people are in there or how big the room is, but you can hear other people chattering. There's other people around. And you sort of reach around and you're like, I feel a table and I feel a chair. Somebody over farther away, they say, I feel a shelf. And then somebody over there is like, I think this is a cushion of some kind. And nobody can see enough of it to even know, is it mostly tables in there? Is it mostly couches? Am I in a furniture store or am I in a living room?
Yeah.
I don't know.
How many decks are a 7 in here?
Yeah. And the people that have the most knowledge, which is Wizards of the Coast and us and, other people that we've been doing this for 10 years. Jimmy and I talk to in person over 500 people per MagicCon. That's 2,000 people a year, and that's just strangers, right? We have interacted with over email and DMs and Discord and had Twitter conversations and read all of the comments on all of our videos for a decade, right? We have talked to tens of thousands of Commander players, and the only thing I can say after all of that is I have no idea. I don't know what's in the room.
There's no concrete numbers. So
anybody that says they know what's in the room, they're lying. Wizards doesn't know. I've talked to the people at Wizards to try to be like, hey, here's what I see in the room. What do you guys see? Because of the other entities that exist in the world, you're the most likely to have more information than me. And Air Force I said it, and everybody I've talked to at Wizards has said it. We don't know either.
We don't know.
So I like that they're saying that now and admitting that, because that humility is what it takes to make responsible decisions in the format. Because the last thing you want to do in a dark room where you don't know what's in it and how many people is start running.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like the rules committee did, when what you need to do is walk slowly with your hands out in front of you so that you don't bump into anything, you don't knock anything over and hurt anybody.
Yeah.
You
Or
don't
just
skin your own knee.
communicate.
Yeah.
Be like,
but not-
I'm coming through the room. Here I come.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
moving forward in this direction. If you can hear my voice, just be careful. I might bump into you. You be careful. You proceed cautiously in the face of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So the fact that Wizards is saying that, I think, is a really good sign. They have the humility, at least right now, to maybe not think they know everything. I think Aaron Forsyth, one of the smartest people I've ever met, Gavin as well.
Yeah.
Both those guys are huge pluses. I mean, Gavin's like, putting Gavin in charge of this, like,
Thank
how
goodness.
much of your apprehension does that absolve?
Oh, I mean,
A decent amount for me.
I think there's very
Huge amount.
Yeah, there's very few people who know Commander quite as well as Gavin Verhey.
I'd say there's very many people on the planet that I respect more than Gavin
Yeah,
Verhey.
like it's been his life's work to understand and better Commander and better entertain Commander players and
And just Magic in general. And
Yeah.
Gavin's one of the few people you ever meet that's like very non-defensive. He's very open-minded. You ever have conversations with Gavin, he's not trying to like be the smartest guy, even though he's smart. He's smarter than
Yeah.
you are. He's trying to hear you and like take that information in. And like, one of my key things that I would say about people that like makes me respect them the most is when you're having some sort of debate, if anybody ever says to you, good point, and then reevaluates. If you ever see anybody do that, I think that's one of the most admirable qualities in a person. I mean, I have to sort of tell myself like, hey, be more like Gavin, because it's not a thing that I admittedly comes naturally to me as well. So in the pros column, Gavin Verhey is a pretty big one for me.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
I think a lot of the people at Wizards you can point to.
That's a good point too.
I didn't think that before, but that's a good point.
I think if you
Sorry,
look at
Gavin.
the individuals in Wizards, it's one of the strongest tools they have, right? Where they like very few people are more engaged with Magic or love Magic more than the people who work
Really
in that
good
building.
point.
If we're talking about
Yeah.
the individuals,
Yep.
I would trust every single one of them because they mean very well. They think about it constantly. They love this game.
Yep.
And that is a huge plus. There's a huge amount of people in that building that love this game.
Yeah, it's easy to look at a big corporate entity and think evil, but like when you interact
Lawyers.
them on an individual level, you find they're very passionate, they're very smart, they're thinking very deeply about it. They love the game, and most of them were players that, you know, their dream job was to work at Wizards.
Right.
Yeah. And it's
I-
specifically the game design team that has the quote unquote
Right.
management. Now, we'll talk about the other parts of the company, but that is very important. It's not like they're giving this to the marketing team.
Yeah.
They're not giving it to the VPs only, right? They're specifically saying the game design team, and within it, there is a commander design team. Gavin's been running the Pauper stuff for quite a while as well, right? And people will say that Pauper isn't as healthy of a place it's ever been. So these are people that know about the format, and when it comes to making these types of decisions, bans and all that stuff, are generally on average going to be much more skilled and qualified than your regular commander player or even someone on the rules committee.
Yeah, that's a really good point. They're professional game designers, and when
Their
you're
lives have
making
led up
decisions-
to being this.
when you're making decisions about bans and rules and stuff, that is game design.
Right.
So
Something I wanted to point out that I haven't seen a lot online about this is I think one of the greatest strengths that the Wizard has is a network of game stores. Like being able to communicate directly with the communities, being able to guide how Commander Nights are designed, being able to get information from them about what are people playing, what do they like, how much CDEH do you have. All of that is how you get data on Commander. And now that they have this management, I think they're more motivated to get data on Commander than they ever have been. And so that feels like a huge tool, both getting communication from the game stores and being able to distribute it to make sure that when Commander is getting played in untrusted places, it is as a more firm hand guiding it.
Yeah.
That is not something the rules committee had access to. Like
Yeah.
the network of
Nor would
WPN
they be like,
stores.
print out these flyers, bring them to your LGS. This is how Rulesio works. Whereas now that WotC has this, they inside their boosters, they'll tell you how to build a limited deck. Right?
Yeah.
Who's to say that they cannot
Well,
now
sure.
implement something to be like, here's how a Rule Zero conversation goes. Here's how our bracket system or whatever it's going to be goes to a certain degree. So they do have the ability to make steps that may have seemed like oversteps in the past, but they're now just like, no, this is how we want to steward a healthier format. So they do have a lot more access to that type of messaging.
another thing we have written down in the pros column is knowledge about upcoming card design and products. So that's just obvious, but there's there's a possibility for more synergy between what the format wants and what they're actually doing. There was obviously conversations that happened before, and it's not like they just did things blind and just like the rules committee didn't know what was going to happen. Like they brought people in, and we've consulted on things before.
Sheldon told them not to print Elish, right?
Yep. I told them not to print Jewel Lotus. That did happen, but it is still like at least communication was happening. But now it's all within their walls, and so I think that communication will just be better. Yeah.
Certainly the timelines will be able to be a little bit more perfected in terms of like I don't think Wizards would ban Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt while Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt packs were in the hands of the people. And that is not a communication that is perfect between the rules committee and Wizards. And those kind of feel bads at the very least can be avoided, at least in a more like direct overlapping way.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some nefariousness behind that. People accused Wizards of trying to dump a bunch of product that had those cards in it at the time, but we have nothing to actually support that.
Yeah, I think we don't know enough. Yeah, there's just to lay it out. There's conspiracy theories basically saying that Wizards found out that they were going to ban these things, and then we're like, quick, let anything that has these things, let's sell it now because we won't be able to sell it later.
They put it in Festival into boxes.
Yeah, exactly. And they used some of these cards as chase cards in sets that were pretty recent as well. And a lot of people are saying like those jerks, they knew it was going to be banned, and they did that. And I think we don't know the timeline. I don't know exactly when Wizards knew this was happening. We know that rules committee's been talking to them for a while, but I don't know when the rules committee finally said, okay, we're doing this. Again, because we were on the outside of this decision. But we know for, as much of a fact as I can put quotes around from talking to multiple people at Wizards that they tried to talk the rules committee out of doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's any evidence that anything really nefarious was going on. I think there was a big hope that, it get talked through. It would maybe be, there's been many plans that we said would probably work, and one of those would hopefully be enacted or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But in either case, I think we can agree that anybody opening a Festival in Boss right now that gets a Jeweled Lotus, it sucks.
It sucks.
For that person. and Wizards would at least try and not have that happen.
Yeah, for
sure. Which I think is a plus.
Yeah. They also mentioned on stream, again, that they are still looking to interface with the community. Gavin said he definitely wants to make sure that there is at least one very well-informed CEDH player on there as well. And so I think, I see this as a pro, which is before the rules committee could just say something and not really be held accountable because then no one's paying them. It's not a job, right? But here at Wizards, should they hire someone whose job is community manager, commander, it is literally in their job description to do the thing. So there is some amount of responsibility that's being put into Wizards' hands that is going to be formalized inside a more corporate working system, which is like, you are hired here to do this thing. Or if you say something, it's not just, it was a random blog post, but no, this was official company messaging out to the public. There is a level of accountability that goes with that. So I am very glad that it is Gavin that's going to be heading up these conversations with the community. He's the exact right person to do so. And again, very fortunate to have someone like that there to do that. But I do think for me, it's personally a pro that yes, the statement has been made, and it is very likely something that they will feel obligated to follow through on, both from a love of the game standpoint, but also just from this is my job now. I do have a duty to follow what I said in public. I can't just sort of reverse Uno on it at any time. It's been said on stream, it's been said in person, all sorts of different things.
Yeah. All right, we've got a lot to talk about this episode, but we're going to pause right here for a few words for our sponsors.
Sorry I'm late. I had to re-sleeve. Oh, your decks are looking cool.
Oh yeah, I've been loving this new Mana 8 line from ULTRAPRO. These Apex sleeves are literally the best shuffle feel I've ever had. And it keeps my cards safe while repping my favorite color, red.
I'll do you one better. I'm showing my devotion to my favorite color, white, with the Alcove Edge deck box.
Ooh.
It's got the symbol on the front and also a cool stylized interior pattern.
Nice. But I think I got you both beat. I've got the Apex sleeves, the Alcove deck box, the padded binder, and this sleek stitch playmat, all in my favorite color.
Josh, that's green.
You play blue?
But with this setup, they won't know that ahead of time. They'll see this big, bold tree, and they'll think Josh has turned over a new leaf.
Yeah, you're not fooling anyone.
People will know. Everybody knows you play blue.
No, they don't.
Hey, Murph. Yeah? What color is Josh playing? Blue.
See?
Yeah, but he didn't even see all my stuff.
Keep your cards safe and stylish with the Mana 8 accessory line from ULTRAPRO.
Choose from 6 stunning designs that let you show off or disguise your favorite colors in Magic, all while keeping your collection secure and protected. Go to ultrapro.com/command to get your hands on their premium Apex sleeves, along with deck boxes, playmats, binders, and more.
Support the show and rep your colors with Mana 8 at ultrapro.com/command.
Listen up, fleshbags! You're in the domain of the Lord of Pain! The Lord of Pain less for high-quality audio, that is, with RAYCON wireless earbuds! Look, it can be torture finding things in life that just work how they're supposed to. So when my coffee maker's on the fritz or my Iron Maiden gets stuck shut, I throw them in the pit. But you know what never causes a fuss like that? RAYCON's best-selling everyday earbuds! They just work, and RAYCON keeps making them better and easier than ever. Their new multi-point connectivity lets me pair with 2 devices at once, so I can switch seamlessly from listening to the screams from the rack on my phone to the crunching of Black Vice on my laptop. With RAYCONs, managing my Razorkin empire has never been simpler. The optimized gel tips keep my ears comfy while I spread discomfort, and with a 32-hour battery life, they can last even longer than my victims!
Stop the fuss. Go to buyraycon.com/command today to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 50% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/command. Again, buyraycon.com/command.
Browsing for some new tech?
Yeah, I'm building Tiamat and ARCHIDEKT. Ooh, how about Zergo and Ojutai?
Did you just drag and drop that card image directly into your deck?
Yep, with ARCHIDEKT, you can drag and drop card images from EDH Rec or Scryfall directly into the deck list. No typing required.
That is so cool.
Ooh, okay, check this out. I'm gonna drag and drop Dragon Storm into the deck, and then boom, I'm gonna drop a bunch of dragons on the battlefield.
A 9-drop, huh? Seems ambitious.
It was just for the pun. ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/command-zone.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation. Let's get back into it.
One other pro in the pro column, and I've brought this. I've gone round and round, I think, over the years. If you watched all of our content for 10 years, by the way, you're awesome if you did that. I think there's been points of time where I was in favor of Wizards taking control, and there's been points of time where I was like, actually, I don't think that would be a great idea. And early on, more so than, I think for the last 5 or so years, I've been like, let's just keep the rules committee.
Yeah.
But one of the things I remember bringing up back in the day about one of the plus sides about Wizards running the format is right now, the way it worked was there was a rules committee that was just completely outside of any real influence by anybody, right? Because you couldn't vote for them to be there or not there. And they weren't tied to the sort of revenue structure of Wizards of the Coast. So you couldn't even vote with your wallet, as we say. Whereas with Wizards, if you really don't want something to happen and enough people agree with you and it affects sales, they will feel that in a way that the rules committee would never have felt. And so in theory, there is a way to influence, as a consumer, what Wizards is doing with Commander, at least in theory.
In theory. I think that is a long list of pros, and a lot of those are reasons to put hope behind it. But obviously, anytime a corporation gets involved, there's a long list of cons as well to this transition of power. Starting with the fact that Wizards is financially motivated, and that's just
not just that,
line.
Wizards is owned by Hasbro. Hasbro is a publicly traded company. In general, companies try to make their graph go upwards with their annual, quarterly sales reports. When doing that, that affects their stock price. It affects the whole company as a whole. This is the system that our corporate structure is built into.
Our economy is based on, kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know Hasbro has been having a rough time of late.
Yep,
so
big
there can
layoffs
be
last
forces
year.
from outside of Magic that could conceivably cause them to make decisions about Magic to try and up revenue there to make up for other sectors and other problems, and that's worrying, right?
Yeah.
Because it's stuff that's just not even involved with the game, and there's listen, we got to squeeze a little more blood out of this rock, and that can cause them to make decisions that are more short term than long term. And corporations are just revenue. That's their priority: generate revenue and increase the generation of revenue year over year.
Yeah.
So that's not making decisions solely based on the amount of fun there is in the format, right? Like that's what.
Yeah, or if it's healthy or not necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's always going to be, and I know a lot of people out there, they hate the sort of money aspect of, we said 100 to 150 million dollars maybe was lost in the ban decision. And there's a lot of pushback from I liked this ban side of this shouldn't matter. They're just game pieces. But like it's just the world. You have to factor in the money factor. And this, before I think like, hey, they should think about gameplay first, and they should just factor this in as like part of it, right? It shouldn't be the sole thing. It should mostly be about the amount of fun that's in the format.
Yeah.
But you can't just ignore it. But Wizards is going to be in a different position where it's like, the most important thing is the money factor. Now, the fun will lead to money.
Right.
Hopefully.
More players, more money, more fun.
Like, hypothetically, the more fun Commander is, the more money we make.
Because more players will be joining it. The player base will be
But
growing.
they'll be
And I think like certain people in the building understand that, right? Gavin's
Yeah.
like, if Commander is fun, more people play Commander. But not everybody in the building understands that.
Well-
and not everybody in the building understands what fun means.
And there's also forks in the road where the economy dipped, this other sector, something happened. Hasbro's having, Nerf guns aren't selling as well right now or whatever. And we need more revenue from over here. And so we're going to make a short-term decision. We're going to,
Sorry, Commander, you got to release one more product this year.
yeah. And it's going to make the format a little less fun. But right now we're more worried about making a little more money. And that's the scary part, I think, about, this part of it.
Yeah. The counterpoint to that is that we need to better understand in general what exactly stewardship of the format means. Because if it's just the ban list, then the things that we just talked about, which is like Hasbro says, hey, we got to squeeze some more money out here, that's going to affect the game design committee the exact same way. But when it comes to, now will this change the way that we are doing our job as it pertains to the bans and the other parts of the rules committee's obligations that are now being held by Wizards, then I think you can start to make a bigger, more important correlation. Because let's just say rules committee is still in charge. Hasbro, something goes wrong, Transformers dies. And then all of a sudden it's like, we need to make up for that money. Wizards, I'm so sorry, but we're gonna have to squeeze all of these different things. You have to release 5 more products this year. You
We're
figure
going to have
it
to
out.
release Jeweled Lotus 2.
Or,
Yeah.
hey, you better design some cards that make people really excited, which is usually design overly powerful cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we need to design another Jewel Lotus or 2 so people are excited and they buy more stuff.
But in the past version where the rules committee was still in charge, would Wizards still just design Jeweled Lotus as opposed to them now having charge? That's the thing that,
But if it's a Lutri type thing, they have to worry about it a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, hey, there's this other governing body that we're going to have to negotiate with. And if they sort of understand what we're doing, they have the power to be like,
No.
we're just going to say that card doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we lost a check and balance here,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, there you go.
like
Yeah, it was separation of church and state.
it really was. And now the church has it all. The state has it all. I don't know. What is
The
Wizards?
fox is guarding the hen house. There's a lot of different ways to say it.
Yeah, before we had like if a card got printed and it was going to be a problem, it would be banned by another group of people who decided it was a problem. But now the people that made it have to sell boxes, and it's going to make it a lot harder for them to ban it while boxes are still on shelves. Like, it's going to take more time for it to get banned, which means players are going to be more financially invested in this problem card. It exacerbates a lot of this problem, especially when we still have a ton of really expensive staples running around. Like, a lot of people have pointed out, Prof pointed out very astutely that like a lot of this whole thing wouldn't have been as extreme of a problem if the cards that got banned, Dockside, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, were $20.
Yeah.
And that's true. The financial stuff would have been felt a lot less. Obviously, there's like some of the emotional problems are still happening, but you're not looking at a gaping $3,000 hole in your pocket and being mad at yourself in the game that you play.
I think Crypt probably still a large amount of outcry because people are just attached to it. They've had it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good point and fair to make.
Yeah.
But it's kind of naive once again to think that the corporation has a vested interest. Some cards are going to be worth a lot.
Yeah.
They're going to figure out a way for some cards to be worth a lot. And if it's not those cards, it'll be other cards. But they need reprint equity because we talked about this on the thing. If you are, if you're just a living card game where all the cards are worth the same amount, you can't make it over like rough design periods where like you missed. The limited format wasn't good, standard's not good, and nobody buys stuff. You have to have a collectability aspect and a value aspect to bridge the gap to keep you safe. Those are insurance policies against like, hey, game design missed here. People aren't having as much fun. We need to be able to just get them to the next set and still have them buy stuff for now. And then the game just has to be fun often enough that like the other things can kind of bridge those gaps. And I think, well, I mean, whatever it is, there's going to be some expensive cards. So like, will there be more expensive cards under the new regime than there are now? I don't know, but I like
certainly be harder to ban them.
Yeah, and I like what you said. There's just going to be a more incentive to act in that certain way than there was before. Will it always? I think we're talking in like slight degrees of difference, but over a long enough amount of time, the way compound interest works, a 2% or 1% change from the course that you're on eventually gets you pretty far away where you would have been otherwise. I hope Commander's still around in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, they said explicitly in the stream today that was their goal, right? Like all of the decisions that they make on play design is so that Magic and Commander last forever.
Yeah.
And that's really lovely to hear. And I really hope that that's where we wind up.
I think the biggest con, though, is that they are under no obligation, nor would they be allowed to state if a financial thing is changing something that's happening on game design site, right? That's another huge con, is that as much as we love the people working on the game, they're not there to tell us, like, so sorry, but Hasbro says we have to do this. Yeah. That gets them fired on the spot, right? So that is something that we will just not have access to information-wise. And we didn't have access to it before, notably, all right? But now that they are again, the checks and balances are moving in-house, some parts of that equation we will never know as a public-facing side of it.
And that which is just going to lead to a lot of conjecture where, like, people think it's happening all the time when it's not happening all the time, but it is probably happening sometimes.
To some
you just
degree,
don't know which ones it is. And,
And it's also up to them whether or not how they want to be transparent about these sorts of things. Do they want to tell us about their new checks and balances system or any of that? Like with them holding it in-house, certain things are just NDA'd or certain things are never allowed to leave the door. And the conjecture that gets created about it, I think, as we've seen, can sometimes be very harmful if it's not true, but also is just everyone in the same dark room trying to figure out what exactly is in the middle of it.
Yeah, I mean, a huge downside here is that the players have less direct access to the people who are making the decisions because it's hard. It's going to be difficult to point to, like, it's Gavin because it's Gavin and it's Aaron and it's Hasbro
5 other
and
people
it's
in different
the design
departments.
team and this person left, but there's a new person in. It's not going to be clear who to communicate with to be like, things are not good right now.
And that's good for some of you out there because you were stupid and you sent threats to those people.
For better or for worse. Like obviously before it was nice when you could talk to Jim and express your concerns about the format and Jim heard it and could have directly affect change. Now you can talk to Gavin and Gavin will be like, we'll see. Yeah. I'm affected by 1,000 other things that are happening in this room.
Yeah, but at the same time, did the rules committee have the same power necessarily? Because Jim could also go, well, we'll see. Some things you just told me about, I have no control over, right?
Sure.
So there's, I'm not trying to just sit here and play devil's advocate. But
that's the same as in Wizards, though, right? Like some people are still going to come up to Gavin and be like, you need to fix this, and he's not going to have any control over it.
Yeah, but at the same time, you could tell Jim to fix something, and I'm just saying that, like, it doesn't necessarily drastically change that part of it. It's at some points the feedback you give will just not do anything, but just be feedback, right?
What do you two think about the relative trust part of this? So when the RC made a decision in the past, they're separate from Wizards, there would still be some people saying it, but it wasn't, always like super heightened of like this was for monetary reasons. For the most part, you kind of trusted that the rules committee was making decisions based on like what they thought the best, would cause the most amount of fun to exist in the format. And I don't think Wizards has that same amount of trust.
No.
So now it suddenly draws into question all decisions they make in a way that maybe the rules committee didn't have to deal with. Do you agree that the community doesn't trust WotC that much?
This is so difficult to answer because the different parts of and this is the same dark room that we're in, because the truth is never so simple as just, yes, they do or no, they don't. Because different parts of the community trust WotC for different things. You could ask people that are just solely limited players. They probably love WotC. Limited is great. We've had some banger sets in the past year.
What's not to trust?
Right, what's not to trust?
Play boosters?
Yeah, sure. Sure, and there are things that diminish that trust, but overall, I think limited players are pretty happy in general, right?
Yeah.
Commander players, it's a mixed bag. Some people love Jeweled Lotus. Some people think it's the worst card ever printed. So I think in general, it's really hard to even determine the amount of trust. I will say, though, that this recent spurn of events and the way that the outlash has been happened has drastically reduced trust, because all we're doing is opening a door and going like, hey, how many reasons can we bring out of that door to as to why you shouldn't trust Wizards, as opposed to the the much lower percentage of people that are like, hey, let's look at why we can trust them. Right. So we are spilling onto the internet thousands of opinions about why you shouldn't trust Wizards, and that's why I think in general the trust level is going to be lower than it ever has been in regards to Commander specifically.
It's interesting. I think it like many things in Commander, it depends on what group of Commander you're looking at. I think the more invested players trust the rules committee more than they trust Wizards. I think the less invested players have never heard of the rules committee. Therefore, of course, they trust Wizards more.
Well, trust even means something different to those people, because
absolutely.
What is it there to trust?
Like,
it's the company makes the
trusting.
game. That's the game. It's the game. That's it.
I don't even, why we care about them?
Yeah.
Who are they to me? And so I think that it really, really varies. And I think it depends on who hurt them most recently.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the recent move by the Rules Committee probably reduced trust in the Rules Committee enough in aggregate to like kind of make, again...
Oh, my trust in the Rules Committee dropped to almost 0 after that last banning. I was like, what? And now I'm just I just can't trust anyone.
I trust no one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge shakeup, right? This makes people feel like the format that they thought they knew is not that format anymore. And now we have to pick up the pieces and be like, it's still Commander, right? Like, it's...
Yeah. Yeah, I still believe it will ultimately be okay.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're going to play in the margins here, and there's a parallel universe where this didn't happen, and will it be ultimately 10 years from now better or worse? It's really hard to say, honestly, because so many other decisions would go between now and then in the parallel universe, where it's like, we'll take this in stride. I do think it's worrying, but it's not like, Wizards is going to make Commander cards, and they're going to make, some changes a little bit to the format, but I don't think they'll probably be drastic, and ultimately it'll be fine.
This certainly simplifies who you're screaming at online.
Just always Wizards.
Always Wizards, yeah.
Always Wizards.
Sorry, Gavin.
Let's talk about the next con we have listed, and it's in regards to
Magic
CDH.
Con? Oh, no, con.
Yeah.
CDH, I think this is a huge thing. I think this is much bigger than the fast mana ban. I think this is extreme, right? Because now CDH goes from a plucky little format that existed in a bigger space that could run its own tournaments and manage its own, sort of how they handle proxies and all of that. And now all of a sudden, they're a plucky little section of a big format that's run by Wizards. Mm-hmm. And now their tournaments are more rogue than they've ever been, right? Because now their ban list is decided by a corporation that doesn't support proxies, and they have a tournament system that relies on proxies for attendance.
Right.
They have a vintage problem. And I think what that means is they're going to have a section, like in my mind, eventually Wizards supports sanctioned tournaments for CEDH. I don't know how long that will take. In my mind, that is my assumption. And that means that there will be sanctioned CEDH tournaments that do not allow proxies. And what does that do to the CEDH events that do allow for proxies? Because the sanctioned ones are going to offer more money, right? So now suddenly the CEDH community needs cards, real ones.
Is it in Wizards' interest to sanction CEDH tournaments, or is it more in their interest to? Because what do they have to gain from sanctioning tournaments, do you think?
I mean, if they want firm control over this format, I think that is an expectation from the CDH community. And
that Wizards will begin to sanction their tournaments and now not allow proxies? Because I feel like the CDH community their expectation would be like, please do not touch us, because we have to exist in a world where proxies and all that stuff are very commonplace because of the power level of the decks and the types of cards we're trying to run.
I mean, if they want to be a legitimate competitive format and recognized as such, I think that's an inevitability for them, right?
Notably, none of us here are deep into CEDH, so it's going to be tough for us to answer for that community.
But it complicates things so much.
It definitely complicates
for them.
things. Oh, 100%. And it gives Wizards a very complicated decision of what do we do with CEDH, because they've already said we don't want a separate ban list.
Right.
But if they say we want to take over sanctioning tournaments, and we still have a very strict no proxy rule because that defeats a huge part of what this game is about for the company, then they're completely at odds with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think likely they'll just stay away from the tournaments for a long time.
Yeah.
Because it's a quagmire in a lot of
Such a
levels, right?
mess,
There's
yeah.
so many, you got to deal with, there's all this talk about like how intentional draws and things work, and you have to deal with collusion between players, and like they have to deal with a lot of stuff if they step into that quagmire. And I think they should rightfully be happy to just be like, they're going to do what they're going to do. It's fine. We're not going to get involved. I think that also, where would those tournaments feed to, and what would ultimately happen? Like, right
Pro
now,
Tour
exactly.
CEDH?
Yeah, exactly. Is that a thing that happens? You'd also be encouraging a lot of people to step into the CDH, because as soon as you start sanctioning tournaments, and if you're right, and there's bigger,
Now you have pro players that have to learn CEDH to compete.
but is that a thing they will want? Because it'll make their governance of the format more difficult. Because right now you have a small group that you have to consider, but as soon as that group becomes larger and larger and larger, you have to consider them more and more and more, and that becomes harder and harder and harder.
I have to believe somebody in the competitive world looks at CEDH and says that's where a lot of money lives. A lot? I don't know. Maybe they'll have more numbers than we do, but to be like...
They don't, though. I know for a fact they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. They, like I said, we're all in the dark room, and Wizards is in the dark room with us, and it's all estimates, but they don't really have like how many CDH players are there. Every time I talk to somebody about it, they're like, we couldn't put a number on it. We don't know. Yeah, it's just impossible to tell.
I do think that
it's interesting, because I think that the ramifications for CEDH, where we clearly nobody here is really certain,
We're guessing.
are different than they are for casual.
For
and
sure.
so, how Wizards will handle that is going to be interesting to see.
I will say the proxy thing is very interesting, though, because the rules committee never made any outright statements about it either. But, as a more casual format in Commander, people always talk about it. And so if there was a world where the rules committee was to take a firmer stance on it in the future, if they still existed, being like, hey, you can do this or whatever, then that clearly is no longer even in the equation now that Wizards has control of the format. So if there is more stances to be taken on this sort of thing, it will be seen now that Wizards has control as opposed to before, I would say.
Sure.
It's always been a murky area in general to begin with.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, the last con that we're going to talk about here, I'm sure there are others we didn't bring up, and this is something I put down, is corporate governance issues.
Oh, those are a lot of big words over there.
So I don't know if either of you have worked in a very big corporation, but I've worked at Disney and I worked at Universal. So two multi-billion-dollar places that have thousands of employees. And so that particularly worries me, because there's two things I noted. One is Commander's a format that moves slowly. We often see a single change or no change over multi-year periods. And we have the same leadership for the last 15, 13 years, whatever, right? The exact same. And in fact, we saw a change in leadership. We haven't talked about this at all, but I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, right? We had a change in leadership, format under new management. The very next decision they made, the plane went and just dove straight into the side of the cliff. Like, I don't know how else to put it. And it just is evident that the change in leadership had to have something to do with that, right? Like, I don't think we all knew, but in my mind right now, Sheldon was single-handedly holding back the gates of hell this whole time. Whether that's true or not, it just feels that way.
Yeah.
Well, leadership at corporations changes a lot. And because of the way that it's structured, you've got you've got director level, and then you've got VP executive level, then you got C-suite level. And, Gavin, who we love and is awesome, is around the director-ish level. He's not a VP or anything. Aaron's at the VP level. Then there's C-suite level of that. We know we've already had 2 different CEOs in the last 3 years, right? Oh, sorry, 3 CEOs, because Chris
Cynthia
stepped down in early 2022, I believe. Then we had Cynthia, and now we've got this new guy.
Well, Chris stepped up.
Sorry. Down from, stepped up to Hasbro. And we have this new person coming in who, by the way, I hear does play Magic, and we're everybody's very excited that is a gamer, worked for Blizzard for years. This could be a good thing. It's not necessarily always bad. But what I mean is there's been a lot of changeover. And that's not even counting the changeover that happened at the C-suite level and the VP level. People come in, they go. The focus of the, changes, people that made promises aren't on that team anymore. This does worry me, because the institutional, consistency. The institutional consistency isn't always there. Now, we heard Gavin on stream and Aaron on stream, and they've both been at Wizards for a long time, 13 years, 23 years. And, I would expect Gavin loves Magic, probably could go to any other number of game companies if he wanted to, has stuck there because he's invested in it and he likes it. But there's just no guarantee that everyone involved, or even the key people involved, will even be sitting in the seats they're sitting in a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
Or that someone on top of them won't come in and change things.
Exactly. A VP can come in and be like, this is a new focus for this division of the company, and we're now going to be doing this where we used to do that. And in fact, they often do that because what's the whole reason that you're coming in and getting hired? It's usually to either right the ship or like you're a leader and you're like, I'm not going to come in and just do what was being done before. That doesn't say anything about me. It says what's about the regime before. And they will just, as a matter of course, change the strategy just so that it's their strategy and not somebody else's. And that scares me because I've seen it from the inside of big companies before. It's possible that it leads to a lack of consistency and zigzagging, and that's just not what Commander wants.
And it's also pressure on the people that are there for a long time that do have a genuine interest in keeping this format healthy and fun, is how much are they going to go to bat for something that a higher exec comes in and wants to change, as opposed to protecting their own job security at the same time. I've seen so many times where someone says, actually, I disagree with you, sir. And that person is now no longer in as many meetings. They are no longer keyed in on certain things. They're moved to entirely different departments. So that is a huge part of corporate just governance in general, is that you don't want to be the squeaky wheel, because sometimes that leads you to being thrown off the ship entirely if ships had wheels.
They're like amphibious assault people.
I guess it could be the steering wheel, but you're not really steering the ship either. You're kind of an oarsman, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that worries me a lot. And the other thing that worries me is the way that corporate governance works is there's usually a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people involved in all decisions, which causes decisions to be difficult to make, because you're like, okay, we got to pass this through the marketing department, the branding department, the art department, the game design department. And I know they said game design is taking over management of the format, but like you said, they're going to have to answer to the other people above them and around them. And getting sign off often requires just the dumbing down of everything, or just glomming on weird stuff to this initiative that's really supposed to be about X, but it's like, oh, well, branding their focus is this. So can we add something about that in there? And then we can put this in there.
And this happened in recent Sets of Magic, notably, right? Dustmorn even has elements of this. So
yeah, so that confusion of vision, I don't love. I think that just is all around could, if we're not careful, lead us to a lot of meandering and a lot of like inconsistencies, which is kind of what got us to where we are. I love that they paid respect towards the fact that stability is really important to Commander. Gavin said that on the stream about, and I think he and Aaron show a good understanding of like slow and steady. We want to be stable and whatever, but the reality of the situation, that's not always going to be into their hands. And so that does worry me. Just the way that big corporate structures and governance works, it's not in favor of, hey, we're just going to slow and steady stay on this direction for a 10-year period.
Yeah. And again, they're under no obligation, nor are they even allowed to sometimes tell you why a decision was made for the exact same depth of reasoning that maybe the rules committee would have written out. 10 paragraphs, that might get them fired.
Yeah, is Gavin going to come on and be like, I wanted it to be this way, the way you all are saying.
But so sorry, marketing wanted this.
Such and such said, and we talked to the VPs and stuff, and Aaron's a VP over there, and I think a lot of them are smart people and good people, but it's just like the way the corporate machine works, it's just hard for like this kind of stuff not to come up.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to find out how much anybody wants their hands on this. And I think the more people want influence, the riskier this whole thing is.
The worst corporate thing that can happen is that there's a hot new product that everyone wants to touch, and then as a result, it just becomes a Game of Thrones-esque sometimes in terms of like who gets what, why, they did this, they talked to this person, right? Like, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but these are the things that arise in a corporate structure that has so many layers, and is a company that's been around for 30 plus years too.
We're an old messy product. You don't want to touch this. It's a mess.
The problem is it's very popular.
Mess. It's the golden goose.
Yeah.
It's also the mess.
Yep.
All right, we've given you the pros and cons. Of course, it's not that simple. How are we feeling after this? It's been a long week and a half.
I don't even know how I feel tired.
Yeah.
I feel
like I have less energy to react this week than because I used all of it up last week.
That's what The Office felt. It felt like the news hit on Monday, that the transition of power was happening, and The Office was just like, "Yep, more of this."
Yeah, it was hard to get your brain to like re-engage as hard as it did with the bands the earlier week, because just sort of the exhaustion of being continuously hit by the wave just kind of like almost beats you into like this weird hypnosis. I felt it too. I had a big headache yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
This is also more nebulous too, right? Mana Crypt banned. I have to go into 5 decks to take it out. Like Wizards has control. Did any of my cards need to get removed?
It's true.
It's also sad.
Yeah.
I feel like it's sad. I think the clearest emotion that I have coming after Monday is like, this is the end of something that was really special and
It's a
unique
bummer,
about
for
the
sure.
format, that we ran ourselves.
Yeah.
And we had an idea of what we wanted.
Yep.
And we had a governing body who was looking out for us.
Yep.
And no matter what Wizards did, we had another group that had our best interest in heart. And on Monday, that doesn't exist anymore. Like that's heartbreaking. That's a really tough thing to really grapple with all the consequences. Like something that we've been saying a lot this episode is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what Commander's going to look like in a year. I don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it could be a great thing. And it could be,
Who knows?
it could be a bad thing. I don't know. But what we do know is that we lost our advocates.
Yeah, I feel like my affiliation and my relationship to what the rules committee was, it didn't feel so much as a loss as more of like, for me, a realization of like, did I actually really care for anything in the first place? Because the rules committee has made a few decisions of the year. I remember when Josh and I sped record a rule, something about the tuck rule way back in the day, right? And since then, it feels like not that many impactful things have happened to make me go like, oh, the rules committee, thank goodness they're there.
It's been 3 years.
But now that they're gone, it's also interesting to be like, what was my relationship to them in the first place? And just looking at, for me, if anything, I'm just kind of in general disappointed with how vitriolic things got. And even in my reply guys and stuff today, it's like, oh my goodness, there are people out there that are stating their opinion, but just doing so in just like kind of grimy and negative ways that doesn't make me feel great in general. So for me, it's just been more of like I'm bummed that Wizards has control now and we lost what was originally like a community run format to that degree. But it's also making me reevaluate a lot of like, what were my actual thoughts on this whole setup in the first place? And why did I care? And if I did care, when, what points did that change? And it's just, for me, it's just kind of like, I don't know. I feel lost, if anything. And just happy to know generally that no matter what, if I want to still play Commander, I can still do that. That to me is the main thing. Commander itself as a format is not dead. Anyone saying so is clearly has no idea what they're talking about. Things are shifting and changing, but to me, the main takeaway is like, yeah, it's a bummer things are changing, but at least I know that my decks are still playable. I can still sit down at lunch with everyone, and nothing has changed about that except for a few cards that are banned.
Yeah. I mean, you both said things I agree with, right? I think it's sad. Because I think I said it earlier, but when I say we had a good thing going,
That's true.
that is mourning the loss of that thing, right? Like we were community run and we didn't agree with everything they did, but they did a good job. They did a good job to the point where the format went from nobody plays it, nobody's heard of it in 10 years to the most played form of Magic that's ever existed. And I wish there was a little more respect for, hey, let's just continue. Let's stay that course. It was like, it's good. We don't need to fix it.
Right.
And I'm going to echo what Jimmy said. I think one of my biggest takeaway feelings is like disappointment with the community. And obviously the threats and stuff already, but I just mean, man, people just have so much, they lack so much empathy. They're so dismissive of everybody else's feelings in this whole thing. And I think I've seen it mostly from the people on the side of like, they like the bans,
right,
being very dismissive of the people who dislike the bans. They call them finance bros, or they say, oh, you just care, cards aren't investments.
You invested, you're an idiot, blah, blah.
Because people are saying like, hey, this hurt me. And your response to that is like, you're not
feeling,
hurt.
Yeah, you're feeling so
Yeah,
mad.
you're just a pub stomper.
Yeah, and it's like, those are real people with feelings, and their feelings are valid. You don't get to invalidate them by just saying like, I don't like the reasons. Like,
try doing that to your romantic partner, by the way. It's not going to turn out well.
And like your instinct is to like try and defend those people because we do have empathy, even though most of us are on the side of like, yeah, I do think from gameplay reasons, it's hard for me to argue. I do think it would be a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't play the cards, so I'm not even representing my own position here. But what I'm saying is like, I see a bunch of people who are displeased, they're hurt by it, and I have empathy for them. And that amount of people, just the sheer amount of them that's clearly out there, signifies to me that like this was not a great call just based on how divisive it was and how many people it hit. But I'm just so disappointed in, like you said, Jimmy, just the way that people are talking about it. And it's just like, it's like, you feel bad just for humanity is like, you know, they're just.
What has social media done to us? Is
just,
how I feel.
Yeah, people just aren't like feeling for other people. Like, and there's a myriad of reasons. And it's like, no matter what reason, you have an excuse for why you don't have to pay attention to the fact that, you know, they don't think it's good and can ignore that and dismiss it and just say, yeah, but I still think this and I'm right. And those people are just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, both people are right because they are in the dark room in their own corner, seeing what they see.
Yeah.
And neither side is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big thing that I keep thinking about is like, nobody has come out of this situation better.
No.
Nobody. The rules committee didn't want this. Wizards didn't want this. Players didn't want this. Whether they wanted the cards banned or unbanned.
They don't want this level of divisiveness.
They don't want this turmoil.
Clickbait.
And many of them don't want Wizards to have it. Some of them do, but like nobody's entirely happy with what has happened.
And all we're doing is now firing shots at each other instead of recognizing that there's just been a lot of things that are happening that have created a massive amount of unhappiness in different ways and different directions.
Yeah. And it's hard to like, somebody asked me whose fault it is. And I was like, well,
start by blaming yourself. Everyone. I mean, your life will be better, I promise.
You could point at 100 different people and you'd be right.
Yeah.
And you could point to 100. You could point to the design of Jeweled Lotus. You could point to how Jeweled Lotus was banned. You could point to the people that play Jeweled Lotus all the time. You could point to the
people that didn't play Jeweled Lotus.
The people that didn't play Jeweled Lotus aren't empathizing with the people who did. And it doesn't help anybody right now to just be like, who should I be mad at? And because I feel like there's nowhere to put your energy right now. It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's been a bad week. And what we're trying to do is make sense of it, figure out where we're going, what we want, and put that intentionality back into the format and protect the things that we love about Commander.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's something that our channel is always trying to do is express why Commander's wonderful. And the last week and a half has been really difficult because that hasn't been expressed anywhere.
I would say the biggest thing for me is that when situations like this arise and we see, if you're just looking at, pretend you're an alien and you're looking at it and go like, wow, something happened and they all just started fighting. That's all they did. They just started yelling at each other. Everyone wanted to be right. Everyone was simultaneously the victim and the oppressor at the same time. I wonder if they're able to use this as a moment of self-reflection.
Sure.
Or if they're just going to keep down this pattern. Because it comes as no surprise to me as a human that we have so many people talking about like, oh, I have issues at the table. I said this about rule 0, but then someone did this later on. And then it's like, oh, there's miscommunication there. People weren't listening. People weren't understanding where other players are coming from. And then we have the same types of arguments online. It's like, there's a correlation between all of this. And I think the big thing is just that we're not great at separating ourselves from our emotions as just in general. It's very easy to get very attached to your emotions. And we are all differently invested in this game, emotionally, financially, whatever it is. Some people play games as an escape entirely. Some people use it just as a pastime. Everyone comes to the game for a different reason. But right now, I think what we're seeing is that we are unable to separate ourselves often from the reasons that we're in it and taking just a step back and seeing that everyone else is here at this point. We all came to this table for our own separate reasons, and to reject someone else from the table because their reason isn't congruent with yours is not really going to bring you more happiness as a result. If anything, it's just causing what we're seeing online, which is extreme divisiveness, people grouping up in certain groups and then attacking each other, as opposed to just stopping and just listening for half a second, because we're all so emotionally and financially and whatever else invested in this thing. So I would hope that this would be a great moment of self-reflection for everyone to go like, okay, why am I here? Why am I reacting the way that I am? Why am I feeling this? and not also rejecting your own feelings at the same time. But, everything should be honored. We should honor our feelings. We should honor other people's feelings, and going from a place of that as opposed to I only want what I want and I reject what everyone else wants, because this is only going to create more violence, basically, in terms of like negative polarity type stuff in terms of conversations with everyone that's happening. I'm rambling, but this is just how I feel. If I was an alien, I'd look at this and go, well, this is a great moment for self-reflection for the entire Magic community. Let's see if it happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's we can take that point and be like, all right, where are we right now? What have we learned from this? What do we want now? Like, Wizards has the format.
Yep.
And I think we can spend this week mourning the loss of the rules committee and mourning, change needs to be mourned. We don't know whether it's good or it's bad. This is a big shift. And I think we need to spend time being like, this is a big moment, but figuring out our heading and like what we want from Wizards. If we were going to speak to Wizards right now and get them, like if we were going to get Gavin and Aaron and all the executives of Wizards, all of Wizards of the Coast in their pointy wizard hats, which they all have. I know this. And when they have meetings, they all wear them. If we could get them in this room, what do we say to them? What is Commander about? What do we, now that you're the shepherds of this format, what do we hope you know?
Yeah. I would also encourage everyone to stay in the present moment. The moment that we start going, it's never what it was before, or it's going to be bad in the future, it takes you out of the present moment, and that is directly the first place that suffering starts.
Sure.
Because you are no longer just being like, hey, I can, again, take my deck, go to my game store, and still play the exact same thing I did yesterday, minus a couple of cards, of course. But I think if you take yourself too far into the projections or the mournings, and I'm not saying don't mourn, right? But funerals can also be celebrations at the same time.
Sure.
So mourning can have a broader definition than just I am sad and unhappy, right? I think that is my takeaway, is like, don't get caught in what hasn't happened and what has happened. Just be present and speak from that place of honesty. And I think that's also how you get your message through to people much more presciently.
Yeah, I already said, like, I'm angry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the toughest thing for me to deal with. Like, I'm mad at the rules committee. I just am.
It's a bummer.
I don't think they're bad people, but I think they made a really bad call. And, but like you said, it's a really good message, right? Of like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that get you? Where does that get you? So, yeah,
honor it. Honor that you're mad, because it's an emotion
okay to
that
be
is
mad,
coming
but
up.
like, yeah, you have to be able to deal with that within yourself and then be like, okay, but I have to like wake up tomorrow and, Commander's still going to be around, and it's like, you just have to kind of be able to move. And I think it is a good way to tackle this. I do want to move on to your question, Rachel, which is, if we could talk to Wizards, what would we say to them about, how we think we should proceed from here that will give us the best possible result for the most amount of people moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, it's been so tumultuous, so divisive, so uncertain that all I really want in the short term is stability.
Yeah.
And Gavin did say that, and I want them to follow through with that. I don't want them to do much. I don't want... We're going to talk about their mention of the ban list, which was, a sentence or maybe two sentences. I know they talk mostly about brackets, but to me, there's a little bit of worrying stuff in there, and that's kind of like the next step that I'm a little bit worried about, is just like, I don't know if they should make any changes at all, but just like, I just want to feel like the ground is solid under us and is going to be that way for a while. Commander players aren't like standard players and modern players. We want to play the same deck for 15 years. We want to switch in some new cards here and there.
Yeah.
But we love our deck. One of the reasons I'm playing a lot of my cards is because I remember when I was a kid playing those cards. And like, we have different attachments. And my worry is they're going to be used to running tournament formats that have a lot of data coming back at you. And, part of the reason why bans work a lot faster and a lot better in tournament formats, there's all this feedback. No, Grief was 40% of the meta. The One Ring, it was 40% of the meta. And then the next tournament went up to 45%. And like, there's just an understanding that as that conversation continues, like, it's pretty clear to everybody, like, those cards are like maybe going to get banned. And then when they finally do, it doesn't feel like somebody just pulled the rug out from under your feet out of nowhere. You were like, this rug might not be safe to be standing on. And I'm gonna move to the edge
everybody
of
was
it.
playing Grief. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the big problem here was that there was a scratch and it was covered with a Band-Aid, and the rules committee wanted to rip the Band-Aid off, but in doing so, they ripped it so hard that they like opened an artery, and now it's potentially lethal. And all they had to, do was a little bit of the lead up communication. So I think those are the two things I would want: stability and just be very communicative.
Yeah.
Because what caused most of this wasn't the substance of the decision or the bans; it was the way in which it was executed and the fact that it so blindsided people. That's what led to a lot of the outrage, and I don't want this to ever happen to the Commander community again, and I definitely don't want it to happen again within the next, the next few years. So I hope they'll just go slow, just be very cautious, just be very conservative with all of their changes and decisions, and just mostly just let the format cook. That has been a very, very successful, strategy so far. And until we have some data that's saying like, oh, it's not working, Commander is not as popular as it was, I don't think there's any reason to make really big changes. So just Wizards, tread slowly and lightly. You don't have to do much.
Use this time to just gather data. Do the thing that you can already do.
Yeah, try and learn about the format is a huge thing.
Trust is at an all-time low.
But be wary of your data, I would say, too.
Yeah.
Don't be overconfident that, we think we...
Yeah.
It's hard. There's so many little pockets of people playing in so many different ways. And the other thing is, it's easy to say, this is a that, and Jimmy's a this kind of player, and Rich is a that kind of player, and Lou is a that kind of player.
And this is a bracket.
And you know what? We're not, though. I'm a different kind of player on Tuesday night than I am on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
I'm a different kind of player on the third hour of the night than I am on the first hour of the night.
Yeah.
I think that's getting lost in all of that too, is you can't silo us off and be like, hey, everybody likes chocolate, we're only going to make chocolate. Sometimes I want strawberry and sometimes I want pistachio, and those have to exist because sometimes I wake up on that side of the bed and we just don't want to eat the same thing for dinner every night, right? So
I think a big thing that is different about Commander players from competitive players is that we have more decks. So we want to be more creative. Yep. We want to have different options. We want to have low power and high power and combo and burn and control. And you want all of them.
Right. And
we don't play them as much.
Yeah.
Where if you're a competitive player, you're like, I'm playing Scam and I'm playing it 400 times today.
Yeah.
It's like, I've never played my deck 3 times in a day. Are you insane? That would the games are 2 hours.
Yeah, you play this deck, then the next game you play this deck, and then the next time, the only time you play the deck more than once is it's new, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to my buddy's house and he doesn't like playing against this deck, but I'll bring this one and this one because they're kind of fun, and this one is a new one that I'm excited to play. You curate.
How many of your decks do you even think you play more than once in a month?
Oh my gosh.
And maybe one.
The more
and
decks
it's
you
the
build,
new
the
one.
less it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, because on this week, I brought these 3 decks, and then I played again next week, and I brought 3 different decks.
Yeah.
And then I played again the following week,
and
I brought 3 different decks. And maybe I didn't even play all 3 of them on all 3 of those occasions, but
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize this because that's how slow the format is.
Yeah.
It's not 400 games in a day. You have tons of data. No. It's 1 game every month over the course of hundreds of thousands of people. You're not going to have data. It's all vibes here, baby.
Yeah. Do you even have a deck you've played, do you think, 200 times?
No.
Yeah. I don't think.
And I've had decks for years.
Yeah. I have 27 decks. I don't think there's a single one of them I've played probably even 100 times.
No.
Yeah. I highly doubt it. Certainly not in the form that it's in.
Yeah. Certainly not 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should be noted that, right, when I first started playing Commander, I built decks because I was excited and I wanted to try out different things. Now that the pace of releases has increased and there's more legendaries than ever, I have slowed down how fast I build decks.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I have more options. It's not like the pace is going up. So I think, what you said is true. This is not just a slow moving format. This is a true tortoise. This thing is just trudging.
Yeah.
And you can do and it's very wieldy, and you can do a lot of things around it, but it's going to be trudging. It's not running.
I think recognizing that Commander is closer to D&D than it is to Modern is a big step, and I think that's going to take Wizards a while to figure out. And that it's something they said in the broadcast. They know it's slow. They know stability is important, but it's really, really slow.
Yeah, we're talking glacially slow here.
Yeah,
which is, I think, one of its great advantages. Kibler had a tweet, and he said, Commander wants to be everything to everyone. And I actually think that's a feature of the format.
Yeah.
It has found a way to be everything to everyone. And that's That's why it's so popular. So don't try and take away that part of it. That is one of the marquee things about it that's good. It can be different things to different people at different times.
Yeah. And Gavin said that too, right? They're designing cards that are not just overly powerful, right? Now they're designing cards into specific strategies that really help benefit it in that vacuum. And I think that speaks to that, right? It allows them to build out these subsections of why people like it, as opposed to just like, because he said we wouldn't be doing another Jeweled Lotus today, right?
Yeah.
So
I think, but like before we leave this sort of how do we feel, what are we trying to express, is like, I don't know if the rules committee could have recovered the trust of the people from what happened last week. Like, I don't think there would be like a wait it out and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Unban the cards, keep the cards banned. Your trust is just gone.
I mean, speaking from me, like, if this went a different way, I think there would have been a huge outcry for at least a large percentage of them to resign. And
there already was, yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have joined that course. Like, I think they demonstrated such irresponsible recklessness that, again, I don't think they're bad people, but man, I don't want to be in the car that's driven by the people who are doing that. I don't feel safe there. And yeah, I think that was something was going to have to change about the leadership.
Yeah.
And we're at this point where Wizards has it, which is an extreme change. But I think Commander players have been asking for it for a while. So we need a refreshed look at Commander. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is the time. Like, was this great? Are we psyched about this? No. But this is an opportunity. You don't want to feel like it was
forced on you and it had to happen.
But this is an opportunity, right?
Sure.
For Commander to be modernized. And whether Wizards bungles it or succeeds here, this is an enormous opportunity, and I really hope they're careful with it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to what we alluded to, which is, I think only one sentence, might have been two, of the article was buried at near the end, so you could have missed it. They said, we will also be evaluating the current ban card list alongside both the Commander Rules Committee and the community. We will not ban additional cards as part of this evaluation. Thank God they said that.
Thank goodness.
While discussion of the ban list started this, immediate changes to the list are not our priority.
So this
Hooray.
demonstrates that we're reevaluating a lot and probably looking at some stuff that haven't been reevaluated in a while.
Yeah, and they pretty purposefully, it feels like, left the door open to unbannings while saying, hey, we're not going to ban anything.
Right.
Do you think they'll unban stuff?
It's such an interesting question because the response of them unbanning stuff would be enormous. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, because they have the option to go in and just say, like, we can unban a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Our philosophy at the game design team is not the current ban list. That was the rules committee. And if they did, it would be it would be even bigger than the shakeup that just happened last week. And I think it would be a positive for the game because Josh and I are both on the sides of less bans is good. But now we're talking about the implications for people that invest in cards or people that have old cards that they wanted to play but couldn't, right? Like, there's so many layers to unbanning that actually makes it like a very enticing option. But does that just further erode trust? Because it's like, okay, well, now that Wizards has control of the format, nothing is going to be the same. The power of balance has changed in the DC universe, or whatever that stupid meme is.
I don't think they can help themselves.
Yeah, that's the other thing,
They're
right?
game
Like,
designers. They're like, ooh,
more toys? Yeah, right?
Are you telling me I get to resculpt this huge format? I think they're going to look at the ban list and be like, cut this, cut that, cut this. And I think it's going to be very difficult for them to put the brakes on that. Right? No, can you imagine them being like, we're just going to keep it? It's just, we'll cut a couple of things. I feel like they're going to cut it.
And everybody out there wants to know the answer to this one.
Yeah.
If they're going to unban stuff, do you think they'll unban any of the stuff that was just banned?
Man.
Not Nadu, obviously. They hate that card and they're not going to unban that.
No.
Nah, dude.
They want that card to be unalived.
But do you think they unban Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, or Mana Crypt?
Do they shift us back into the timeline where only Nadu and Dockside get banned?
I don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah, I mean,
I hope
this is all opinion, speculation.
I hope they don't, because then
I kind of hope they do. Oh man,
and it's because like I think the format's better without him.
Yeah.
And this is a big shifting point, and there's been a lot of fallout because of this ban for the sake of gameplay's improvement. That is the whole thing that started this. And if they just unban them and we're right back to where we started.
But with brackets.
We're going to
We're
talk about the
and
brackets.
It does tie into this.
It
I
does.
think
It
a little
does.
bit.
But like, I think this is an opportunity to start fresh. And if we think that this is a good thing for the format going forward, then I want that for the format. And honestly, I can't even imagine if they're just like, psych, those are unbanned again. All the ones you lit on fire and drew on and donated, and like those are back on the table. Sorry.
What if?
Like, that's so much more chaos.
Yeah, but it also is excitement. Would more people get back into the game if a significant part of the ban list was just removed and turned into another system that they believed was better?
I mean, I think if you left those banned and unbanned a bunch of other stuff, I think you would have more excitement. Because there's still half of the people that voted in your poll, which is only invested players, and there's a lot of problems with polls. But like half the people liked these bans.
The market speculation has brought the ban cards almost right back, I think, to their original prices.
Yeah, they
due to
never
these
went down that
announcements.
far.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are expecting.
Jeweled Lotus went pretty far down for a while.
Yeah.
Like $40 or something.
I saw them at 25.
And
but
then it jumps back up.
once
but-
they hit about 20, 25, people were like buying them. And I think a lot of it was just CDH. They were like, well, CDH will probably.
We're still going to play them,
Yeah.
Find their own rules committee or tournament committee or
But
whatever.
it does feel like the moment that the bans happened, it was the incredulousness about it led to people even saying in the first week, there's no way this is going to stick. So I think there is generally a decent amount, I would gauge, of expectation from players that like, it's not exactly permanent, these bans, especially now that stewardship has been handed over.
People don't know what to think.
It's such a tough decision because the ramifications on both sides are so huge.
Yeah, and how do you actually gauge it? We're in the dark room again, right?
I mean, we're always in the dark room, and I think you have to say we're in the dark room always, and we're always making decisions with a high level of uncertainty, and then approach decisions with responsibility, knowing that you're uncertain. So I'm uncomfortable saying like those bans were better for the format. Even maybe they were.
Yeah.
But I've laid out the weighing system, and I think there's at least enough ambiguity there to not be able to say that's a truth.
To know, yeah.
Sure.
It's probable, and I think we're all on the side of like games will be better, but how much better? What percentage? Right?
Yeah.
And like I always say, did the fun I took away when I banned those from people like Joe Johnson and Cassius, does that balance out the fun I gave to,
Some random person in LGS or
Rachel
HL,
and whatever? I don't know. But again, we're not even talking about that.
But we don't know. Yeah.
Will the outcry will people be more happy or more mad if in a 2-week time they went banned and then never mind unbanned? It's not exactly Wizards' fault, right? Like
We're going to be back in these chairs screaming.
Yeah, I don't even know what we would say. I think if that happens, like I think you just cut to me and I'm just going to be like
shell shocked. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what I mean. I feel like this is the road we picked, regardless of what we think about it.
We got put on it.
I know, but this is the road we're on.
Yeah,
we're in the maximum chaos timeline for sure.
So I feel like we went on an exit, and now they're like, "Are you going to make a last minute change back onto the highway? What? Don't do that. We're
It's
here."
more like they're going to hit reverse, back it up into the cars that are already following it off the road while right. It's just so hard to predict.
Let's get back on the highway in a couple of exits.
So I just want to. I just find this very interesting. So you say don't unban them, and Jimmy say do unban them.
I'm not saying do unban them, but I wouldn't be displeased if things got unbanned.
Let's say it was up to you, gun to your head. You have to make a call.
Oh my gosh!
Ban or unban them, or keep them banned or unban them.
Unban them, not just unban them. Unban more cards.
Do you think it become that's an interesting thing?
I unban others for sure. Leave fast mana ban.
And
for me.
I would say like not in 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. But I think Wizards should make it very clear that and make it like here's our game design philosophy. Here's how it maybe alters a difference. Make a lot of communication around it and lead up into it and be like, and now we're gonna have an unban announcement at X point in time. Get ready, allow the things to move into how they have to. And so the whiplash isn't as severe so that when it happens, it comes with pleasant surprises as opposed to horrid,
Let me ask you, Rachel, does it change your calculus at all if I'm just going to pull some out of thin air that seem likely.
Yeah.
Coalition Victory,
Prime Time.
Biorhythm, Golos, Prime Time. Let's say those Do those seem unreasonable that they would unban? Do you think those would be bad decisions on their part if they did it? And then follow up to that is, does it meaningfully change it if they're unbanning other things at the same time they unban Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt? Does that make it more palatable or does that not matter?
For me, I think leaving these banned is a clearer message if they're unbanning all this other stuff. I love that. If they ban all the fast mana and it's like, look, we're trying to slow the format down. We know it's faster. We're going to take away some big problems and we'll put the rest of the fast mana in this tier 4 or whatever, bracket 4. And then we're going to ban all these 8 mana spells that have like vague feel bads that we can't really measure. Then that says the way we're going to use the ban list is to like try and paint with more broad brushes. But we have this backup bracket system that, we'll see.
Does that mean we have to be in fear that in the future they're going to ban Ancient Tomb?
No.
And Mox Diamond? And
I don't think they would ever push this button again.
Then what's the virtue of sending the signal of like, we leave these two things unbanned?
I think it indicates that they're making an effort to take the most popular parts of fast mana and take it out of the format. It's like there's still going to be fast mana. We're going to cap it in this fancy world.
It's signposting like they've been doing up till now.
It's signposting, but they're leaving this for this tier 4 thing that says like this is where fast mana lives. You can live up here if you want, but it's here. And I think if you take out some of this bigger stuff that was leaking into lower brackets, that was like there were docksides and low bracket pirate decks and low bracket goblin decks and all of that. Like that's why it got banned in the first place. Then you can remove it from the casual part, which the rules committee was always trying to fix. And you unban all the other stuff that doesn't make any sense. And it makes the ban list make like it gives you a clear idea of what Wizards is trying to use the ban list for.
It's interesting what you're saying. And honestly, it makes me, I was thinking like, okay, if they have this one moment in time, they got one chance here to unban a bunch of stuff. It makes me think they will unban Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt because they don't have another shot at that later.
So no.
And so they have one cloud cover, one smoke screen, one moment where they were like, we're going to rethink this whole thing and this is all coming off. And they also muddy the water enough with the other stuff. You won't have a point in time where you can say later, Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt are coming off. But if you do that in a grouping of like 6 or 7 other things or whatever it is,
I don't think that muddies the water enough.
But that's their only chance to do it. It's I just mean
it's their only chance for sure.
From a decision-making standpoint of like, if they decide, hey, listen, we want those, it does make sense that this is the like one moment where they kind of could do it. They'll never have another chance to do it. So
this is also their only opportunity to keep it banned.
Well, I guess by that same...
They will never push this button again. This is they make a decision today or whenever this ban list comes out, and that's the decision.
And here we get into the money question and why you don't want Wizards in charge of the format, because they might make the decision being like, these are 2 chase cards that do exist in products that we were just selling. And we know a lot of people are excited about, and we will just unlock the ability to still sell those again in the future.
Whether that's good or not.
Whether it's good or
been
not.
reprinted like 5 times now.
Honestly, whether it's good or not, the more we talk about it, the more I think they have a decent chance they will. I'm not saying 100% because obviously nobody knows the future, but this is their one moment in time where they really could do it. And they have a lot of cover too. They can give it back to CEDH. We have this bracket system, which also gives them more cover because they say, we're going to put those into the bracket 4 or whatever, which we're going to talk about brackets in a second. I don't know if it's good or bad, and I'm like totally on the fence about...
I think they will unban them. I think like if I'm guessing, I think they'll unban them.
Yeah,
because it's too easy of a button for them to push to throw an expensive mana rock into products.
The more we talk about it,
but
the
I
more sense
don't
it
think
makes.
they should. And I think if
that's valid.
if they don't... If they leave them on the ban list, that says a lot about what they're doing with the rules committee, because they've alluded to this vague collaboration between the rules committee and between Wizards, right? And they're like, we're going to be working with them to do all that. And
every regime in a history of every empire and every government has tried to, the new regime has always tried to tie themselves in some way to the old regime. That's just that's the playbook. How realistic will that be?
Well, I
don't know.
To what degree?
I don't know. We have no idea what degree. Like the CAG hasn't been contacted, so it's
not
like,
officially as CAG.
The CAG has not been contacted.
So it's like I don't know. I mean, I think if they keep them banned, it is their opportunity to keep them on the ban list, and that's it. And if they unban them, then that's their opportunity to get it off. And now fast mana is a part of Commander. For what it's worth, I do think Dockside will probably stay banned.
I agree. I think
Dockside makes the most
Dual
sense to
Lotus
stay.
and Mana Crypt, I would guess, come off.
At the very least, I'm guessing Mana Crypt's coming off because it's just one of those cards in Magic. Jeweled Lotus, a little bit newer. It's kind of a slap in the face because it was the front runner of the chase card of their entire set called Commander Masters, right? And they've said that they're not going to hit that button to make a card like that again, right? If they make another chase card for Commander to sell sets, it'll be different, but it won't be Jeweled Lotus.
Gavin went on the stream and said he thought Jeweled Lotus was a mistake.
Yeah.
What does it say if they then unban the card? There's so many facets to it, and I don't even know what. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't even. Yeah. But well, I won't be surprised. I guess I won't be surprised by anything that happens.
Yeah, me neither.
I will be surprised if they stay banned.
Yeah,
there you go.
But
there you go.
I
But
would
it
like
doesn't
it.
mean that you think that they should.
I think it's just like the decision where I'm 50-50. I'll be like anything could happen. I think it's literally a roll of the dice what could happen. I don't think either one is really favored.
Yeah.
And now Wizards has to make the decision.
How about this?
And
It's
Aaron
crazy.
Forsyth is like,
Yeah.
why am I doing this all of a sudden?
23 years.
I didn't have to do this.
Played in Pro Tours. It's one of those things where it's fun and entertaining to speculate. And it's for those out there, don't start couching yourself in expectations in one way or the other. That is when you're just going to start to hurt yourself. So just if you want to speculate, by all means, hit the comment section, talk about it. But don't start making decisions or investing yourself in the speculation.
Oh yeah, we don't know anything.
We don't know anything.
Okay.
We haven't said it, but this was recorded the Tuesday right after the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anything that happened since Tuesday morning, we're not referring to it and we don't know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tuesday morning, October 1st, 2024.
This has been fairly long already.
Yep.
Thanks for sticking with us. Before we go, we've alluded to it a lot, and it actually made up the bulk of the ink used in the article
And in the stream.
and the stream. The stream was like 15 minutes about the change in power and then 45 minutes about the bracket system.
If you told me that the ban announcement was going to come out and that they were going to mention 17 other cards that were not banned, I would have called you crazy. But here we are.
17 cards. It felt like 200 cards.
200 cards being mentioned in an article about cards that wasn't about.
So if you didn't watch the stream and you didn't read the article, there's this idea around a power bracket system, which is basically another way to have the power level discussion. They want it to be a little more spelled out, a little more specific. So like if you have these certain cards in your deck, it's a 3 and can't be below that. And if you have these, if you
It's
have a
a 4.
Vampiric Tutor in your deck, then it's a 4. And a little bit easier maybe for people to kind of have that power level discussion and sort of match their decks to a pod that like everybody's sort of playing on the level playing field.
They mentioned this is in beta. Truly, based on what they were talking about in the stream, none of this is written down. They weren't sure how many tiers there were going to be. They
Except
weren't
for
sure
what's written in the article.
what tiers was going to be where. They like
if there's going to be more than 4 tiers,
They were like, "What about a point system?" They're like, "We thought about a point system. What about a point system?" This is nothing yet.
It's them attempting to create a better Rule Zero. It's what was alluded to in the original ban article from the Rules Committee about working on the system in the future to help players better understand what they're sitting down next to.
Yep.
Yeah, I think like we got a lot that we could guess on about this, but we've done a lot of guessing this episode, and I think it's kind of we'll see what it looks like, and we'll talk about it then. We can talk about it in broad strokes of just like, do we think this will work? But we don't know anything about what it is yet.
Do you think it's going to work, Rachel?
If it's going to work, everybody has to use it, and nobody that's not going to exist.
Jimmy, do you think it's going to work?
It will work if everyone knows what cards are at what brackets and why. But there's going to be thousands of cards in every single bracket, and just like, and do you before the game, do you have to go like, oh, my deck is 70% power bracket 3 and 10% bracket 4?
They print 300 cards
Do you think
every
they'll
2
take-
months. Do they update the bracket list at that point?
I don't know. It just seems like it's. I understand what they're going for. The intention is to make Rule Zero better, and I'm all about better forms of communication and ways to understand how to actually adequately measure the power of your deck. In general, I believe that groups should be able to self-police and do this themselves, but I don't know if this is necessarily the cure-all.
Yeah, I was optimistic about it when it was explained to me, and then I read it in the article, and I was okay, maybe. And then as they talked about it on the stream, I got less optimistic because I realized the colossal task of like, wait, how is this exactly? As they mentioned more and more cards.
And soaring is power level 1. It's like, no,
Well,
that
and then you start Staff of Domination. Is that a 3 or a 4? And then it's like, I don't know. Exsanguinate,
like if you have infinite
Ensanguine
mana, it's a
Bond,
4.
and then,
But
yeah.
if you
have a
don't, then
combo
it's
piece,
bad.
then it's this. And it's like, so I don't understand how this is supposed to work without like a 15 or 30 page document just for bracket level 3.
Yeah.
So is every card? How's it going to work? Is like every
deck
card,
is going to be a 7 or a power level bracket 3.
like,
right?
are you going
That's
to
what
go
it's
to
gonna be.
Strifefall and type in the card and it'll put a number next to it so you know?
That's the only way this works, right? Is
mean-
if they use tools like Moxfield and ARCHIDEKT to measure like what your actual thing is, because you don't know what cards are on all of the tiers. They said they were only going to put specific tiers or cards on 4 and 3, but then is
Every
everything
deck's
else
just
on
going to
2
be a
and
3,
1?
man. Every deck's going
And
to be a 2.
the thing about Commander is not everybody uses these tools.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like even like AD is my partner. He is very invested, has tons of decks. He doesn't update his decks online.
No.
He doesn't maintain deck lists.
Yeah.
So it's like he has got to look up for each of his decks every time he builds it.
Also, I would say
What
that
tier it is?
the amount of people watching this video, interacting with stuff online, this is like 5% of the actual player base of Magic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
so
there's
many
a huge amount of people that are just
will
playing
never-
precons.
don't even know about the ban list.
No.
Or aren't even affected at all by any of this. So what is this going to do? Do you put this on a single card every time you open a precon? Here's how the power brackets work. Then you have to go to this website and
It's
then look up each
teeny tiny
individual
font.
card. Like, I don't know. It's a lot of complexity.
I really hope it works.
I just
hope it works.
I think this could be the first thing that Wizards does, which is we are opening it up to the community to work with us to figure out the right way to understand how to do Rule 0. It may be brackets, it may not be. That to me would be a great first step, because just making decisions from, again, like very smart people, but the smartest people don't necessarily make the best decisions because they're designing from their own vacuum of thought. Commander is so huge. There's so much complexity going into deck building and how to do a correct Rule 0 conversation that I think that should be a focus instead of just saying, here, we had an idea that we've been baking up for a little bit and we think it'll work, but it's going to require a lot of this. It's like, I don't know.
It's a social format. It's not a card format. And social, like something that Sheldon said all the time was social problems require social solutions.
Yeah.
This is a card solution to a social problem. And we'll see.
Yeah. And just as they talked about it, and they kept mentioning cards, and I was like, oh,
That's a problem.
which one would that be on? And then I'm like, do I have to know this for all
Every
cards?
card, yeah.
I mean, there's like 30,000 cards, and it's like, well, most will be 1, right? Like if they don't mention it, then
Yeah.
you assume it's a 1. But even if there's 5,000, 1/6 of all the cards or whatever that have to have a number, I can't remember 5,000
Yeah.
numbers for
Yeah.
a card. Like, yeah, if it's more than 100, there's no way you can keep it in your head. So now you're down to like literally typing it out. And then they were talking about certain combinations of cards. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, this is a 3, but if it's with this, then it's and it's like, I don't know. I just don't know how you can simplify that down to the point where it's digestible for any normal human being in a fashion that doesn't just like, every time I play a Commander game, I don't want to have like 2 hours pregame figuring out,
And
right?
card
Yeah.
evaluation
I mean,
is one of the hardest
hypothetically,
things.
you should be able to put your deck list in and it spits out a number. And when you're in a pregame conversation,
no.
you're like, I'm a 3.2. I'm a 2 with the
no difference
demonic
than
tutor.
saying my deck's a 7. There's no discernible difference.
There's
to me at
fewer
that point.
numbers.
Anyway,
Certainly.
people just figure out how to game that system if they're pub stumpers right now. If they're the type of people that are,
Sure.
playing 9s and saying they're 7s or whatever, those are the people you're worried about. Bad actors, right? People that
Yeah.
are like trying to, well, they're just going to find like whatever deck the system will mark as a 3, but, is as powerful as a 4.
Or
right?
they'll
Like,
just lie.
I mean, hypothetically.
it's true because I won't be able to tell by looking at their deck that they played if they are the number they said, because I won't be able to remember all the, you know what I mean?
And even at the end, if it's like your deck was clearly a, they'll go, oh, I
didn't
guess
think
you're
about
right, but I won. Bye. Like,
I didn't even
it
think
doesn't
about
matter.
that. Well,
I mean,
no, I put it in Scryfall and it says it's a 3.2.
hypothetically, we're going to have these brackets in 3 weeks. They said they would have it by Vegas.
That seems nuts.
That's
To try
so
and test
fast.
out?
So
Maybe
like,
to test
hypothetically,
out.
we're
I
going to
don't
be able to respond to what the brackets look like in a more solidified form
Sure.
inside of this month, which seems very fast to me. And it again makes me worried about their knowledge of how to read and measure this format.
Well, fortunately, we have a place to give feedback now.
We sure do.
It's the Magic Discord. We'll
yeah.
put the link below. But you can join the MTG Discord. They have a new channel for all things related to this. And it is definitely a peaceful and serene and quiet little place with no opinions being shared.
Well, that's what it's for, is opinions. But
I think the bracket system, at least they're coming from a place of like, we're trying to provide a tool here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it's not something to yell at them about exactly as far as like, you idiots.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
No.
I don't know if this is going to work, but they're smart. They might be able to come up with it in a way that we don't see it. And
Absolutely.
I'm willing to let them give it a shot. I don't have necessarily a high belief that it'll work, but hey, listen, if Gavin says, hey, I think this will work, I will trust Gavin to even if I disagree. It's like, okay, you're Gavin. You're pretty smart.
And I like the idea of letting us play test it as a group at Vegas, if that's what they're trying to do, and then meaningfully listening to the feedback based on what happens and adjusting. That to me is like, fine. That does not affect my experience.
For me, doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're talking about decimal points and all, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think this becomes a successful tool if it's bite size. And if it doesn't need to say, if you have Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor and Imperial Seal and Mystical Tutor and they just then you're a 4. If they just say, hey, like the food groups, it's like, this is tier 4.
Yeah.
And if you've got tutors and this and that, you're here. And if you've got this and this and that, you're here. Those, like a more general tier list that just gives people the tools to have a conversation where they're having a conversation starting in the same place. Because the problem with the number system, right, is my 7 is different from your 7 is different from your 7. But this says, here's what a 3 looks like. Are you a 3? We've never had that tool from a body as big as Wizards before.
Yeah, I guess I'm just based on, because the food group sounds like a good idea, but like, does this count as a tutor? Is this a blah, blah, blah? I think it's going to be the same thing where you're still going to have a rule 0 when you do this. You're going to be like, I think it's a 3, and then you're still going to have to talk, and you have to talk now. And hopefully it'll help a little bit better, but will it increase accuracy of, matching deck levels in a pod? If you think it's going to increase it by 200%, you're probably wrong. It's probably more like 10%.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, maybe it'll make a little positive change, and that might be good enough. Okay.
Final thoughts? Before we're out of here? Very short.
I've had plenty of thoughts. Let's hear your thoughts.
I have one very quick parable.
Yeah.
It's a very fun one. An old man lives with his son out in the villages, and one day his prize stallion runs away. Everyone goes, "Oh, what shame! Your horse ran away. How will you plow your fields?" And the man just goes, "No, we'll see." And then 2 weeks later, the horse comes back with a beautiful wife. And they go, "Oh, how great, how fortunate. Now you can have young horses and you grow your stable." And the old man goes, "Yeah, we'll see." One day his son is out riding the horse, and then the son falls off and breaks his back. And everyone goes, "Oh, what tragedy. Your son has broken his back. He can never work again." And the old man goes, "We'll see." And then the next week they come into town and they're recruiting all the young men to go to the army to fight. And they all go off to war and all the young men die. And they go, "How fortunate that your son was injured." And the old man just goes, "We'll see." So that is the attitude I will be adopting. Is we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We will certainly see.
Watsy. Aha. What do you think about Wizards of the Coast taking the reins of Commander? What advice would you give them on managing the format? What do you think about this bracket system? Is it a helpful tool to you or
do you think it's going to work?
Yeah, you're the CAG now.
You're the CAG.
You're the CAG now, dog.
All right. If you want to pick up any Magic cards, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily.
Who knows what cards you want to pick up now?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily suggest getting the Goloses and the Biorhythms of the world, but a lot of people are. Whatever Magic cards you want to get, cardgame.com/command is the best place to get them. They have a huge inventory, which means that when you add all the stuff to your cart, everything comes in one convenient package to your doorstep all at once.
Booyah.
I know a lot of us are needing or wanting for various reasons to replace cards in our deck right now. Cardgame.com/command has the card you're looking for in the versions and the conditions.
And of course, go to ultrapro.com/command because sleeves cannot get banned. Playmats cannot get banned unless they have some lewd stuff on them, but UltraPro's not selling that stuff, all right? UltraPro.com/command, they have the Magic license for all of the art from the new set, so you can always get what's cool and up and coming and make sure that you look super cool and fresh at the table, and also keep your cards protected. They're who Josh and myself have trusted our collections to for decades now. I still have top loaders from when I was 13 years old, so you know they work, you know they're good, and they will keep your cards in pristine condition so they can keep playing them banned or unbanned. UltraPro.com/command.
Before we go, we got to say thank you to our amazing team here. This is the second emergency episode that they've been pushing out inside of a week. So big thank you to our amazing team. Eric Lem, Rachel Kender, Gaurav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Jake Boss, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Evan Limburger, and Sam Waldo. And of course, to all of you for watching. We hope you're feeling good and playing some fun Commander.
We'll see you soon somewhere.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.